Welcome to the 10th Annual Hour with a Hero. Please stand for the presentation of the colors and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the singing of the National Anthem. Toast the colors! Now please join me in saying the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated.
Every day, an American citizen becomes a part of the greatest military in the world. Every day, more than 22 veterans die from suicide due to PTSD. Every day we walk these halls, do our daily routine without fear of war breaking out in our parking lot. Every day we're protected by America's finest. We're here today because of these people. So join me not just today, Veterans Day, but every day in thanking a veteran and an active duty military member who risked their lives for our freedom.
Picked us up from Okinawa. When we went to get on a C-130 to be transferred to Vietnam, they were unloading body bags. That was a rude awakening because I knew that me or some of the guys could be coming back that way.
Today is a time for Americans to reconnect with their history and the values of honoring and remembering those who willingly and literally faced death for the freedom and ideals we as Americans cherish.
Every day we are defended by the lives of our fellow Americans. But who are they?
My brother.
My cousin.
My dad.
My dad.
My grandpa and my uncles.
My grandpa.
My father, my brother, and myself.
My dad, my father-in-law, my son, and my students.
We are here today to say thank you, and we are honored to know you. There are many men and women serving today in all branches of this military, here at home and in places far away, some places
you never knew about. And they are a part of the best trained, best equipped force in the world. We honor them and their families for the sacrifices they make each and every day to keep our country safe from terrorism, hatred, and injustice.
Everything that has to do with the United States of America, there's no place like the USA. I mean, whether it's freedom, or whether it's food, or whether it's your family, or whether it's entertainment, or whether it's just the good old USA, you miss the country.
The American soldier, he has sacrificed his blood, his sweat, his tears, and sometimes even his life for his country. And we cannot fathom that because we have not walked through his shoes. We have not seen the things that he has seen. We have not heard what he has heard. So join me, not just today, but every day, in thanking a veteran.
Dale Clemens was born a twin October 27, 1946, in Salem Springs, Arkansas, to Robert Clemens and Gerard Riley Clemens. Clemens graduated from Salem Springs High School in 1964, where he went on to attend the University of Arkansas and graduated from Oklahoma State University in 1968. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy and went to the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida, October 1968, for Naval Air Aviation Officer Candidate School. Upon commissioning as an ensign, he completed pre-flight and primary navigation training. Then he earned Naval Flight Officer wings on completion of Advanced Navigation School at Glencoe Naval Air Station in Brunswick, Georgia. Clemens was assigned to Bombardier Navigator training for A-6 Intruder all-weather attack training at Whidbey Island, Washington. Upon completion of training there, he was assigned to Virginia 115 AR ABS. He returned to home base in late 1971, and he was released from active duty January 31, 1972. He then returned to Salem Springs and attended the graduate school at the University of Arkansas and attended medical school at the University of Arkansas. Clemens graduated in 1978, and upon completing residency training in family practice, he returned home in 1981, where he continued private practice at Salem Springs Medical Center. Clemens married Patricia Springer in June 1974. They have two children, Mac, who is an aspiring history teacher, and a daughter, Kristen, an RN in New York City. Please join me in giving Dale Clemens a warm Har-Ber High School welcome.
I did have to do the naval aviation shades, just at least briefly for you all. So get rid of those. Thank you all for inviting me to come, and for you being here, for Har-Ber for providing the opportunity to speak, and for Ms. Lamb for inviting me, and most of all for veterans that are here today and veterans that are continuing to serve us. Now, this is the hour of hero. Certainly I don't consider myself to be a hero. When I think of Veterans Day, I'm reminded of my family members who served in the past, friends who served, companions who served, some of which are no longer with us, and certainly the veterans continue to serve today. I was fortunate when I went to Vietnam that the activities weren't hot and heavy, particularly at that time, so as I say, I had an easier time of it than certainly the guys with boots on the ground, the Army, Marines, and the Navy people who were doing river patrol activities. Because of that, I'm going to tell you some hopefully anecdotal stories and some stories that are a little bit different. Some of my activities I participated in. Some of my stories certainly are unique, but most of my stories are shared by thousands of naval aviators who went through the program I did and then flew. I thought I would introduce initially my family members that participated in the service. I was born a year after World War II ended. My father was in the 6th Air Force, most of which people haven't heard of. The 6th Air Force was actually stationed in the Americas. He was a weatherman in Panama and northern Florida. My father-in-law was served in the Navy twice. He was in the Navy in the 30s, and then he went back when Second World War started. I had two uncles that are also, or three uncles rather, were in the World War II as well. Two of those served in the Navy. One was a CB. I had an uncle, my mother's brother, also served in World War II as an infantryman in Europe. Also, my wife's aunt was a nurse in the Battle of the Bulge. Anybody know what the Battle of the Bulge was about in World War II? It was the final counteroffensive by the Germans, which almost captured several Americans, and they were in dire straits at that time, but they did eventually get out of that situation. But also, my grandfather served in World War I, and he was a artilleryman, but he served in the United States, and he was angry they didn't get to go into combat. Fortunately for me, it's good he didn't go into combat, because I probably wouldn't be here if you know anything about World War I. He was a funny guy. He was a country guy, grew up in Delaware County and hardly ever been anywhere in his life. And when he was stationed near Whidbey, or near Seattle, Washington, just south of where I was stationed, Whidbey Island, Washington. And when he would go on leave into Seattle, he would tell me that he couldn't tell the difference between the Army people, the Air Force people, and the Salvation Army people. So anytime he saw a Salvation Army person, he'd salute them. And anyway, and he also was on the awkward squad because he couldn't keep in step with everybody else. As I grew up, my brother and I did a lot of building model airplanes, and I always kind of wanted to fly when I was young. One of the model airplanes I built was you probably don't know what this one is, a B-58 Hustler, which was the first supersonic bomber that was made specifically for dropping nuclear weapons. So anyway, but as I grew up, I also kind of worked for a while with a veterinarian, and initially I wanted to be a veterinarian and not a veteran, but this comes to my first lecture, I guess, and any number of people that spoke today have spoken about this. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, but it wasn't really a goal. And one of the things that happens when you get in the service, and I'll talk more about this in a little bit, is that things change. And Captain Lamb was here earlier, and he was the opposite example of me. He said that he knew what he wanted to do when he was in 7th grade. He wanted to be an Air Force pilot and go to the Air Force Academy, and he set his goal, and he accomplished that. So yet in life you have to set a goal and make sure it's really your goal, and that gives you an opportunity then to seek the path that you're going to achieve your goal. And also another thing that it does is allows you to have a delayed need gratification, which then allows you to study, work, and you will then be able to achieve your goal. As you mentioned, I signed up and I was enlisted in October 1968. We went to Pensacola, Florida, and in the Navy, Naval Officer Candidate School, you have Marine drill instructors. And about 15 minutes with a Marine drill instructor started giving me some goals. I initially thought I might be a career aviator. Later, I did change my mind about that later too, but it's because I had the opportunity to develop a discipline and learn how to study and work hard. Some issues that happen initially when you get enlisted, the one thing they want to do is sort of do away with your individuality in the initial week or two of boot camp. So you learn how to be a team player. You learn how to do attention to detail. One of the interesting things about attention to detail, even with your toiletry, we had a little cabinet there where we put our toiletries in. Shaving can was a small shaving can. One of the things you had to do, though, was after you shaved, they would come and inspect your box. And if there was any shaving cream left, men who shave know what I mean, if there's a little shaving cream left in the end of the little tube there, you were in real trouble. So you even had to clean that out every day after shaving. Not to mention everything had to be exact order in the cabinet. The other thing you learn to do there is to kind of, again, buckle down, keep your head low, because you didn't want them to know who you were. We had a friend of mine who was about 5'4", that wherever he was, he had a smile on his face, could not wipe the smile off his face. And one day we were standing in attention and fixing to go do something, don't remember what it was. And the drill instructor pointed him out and said, "What are you smiling about? Wipe that silly smile off your face." Well, he couldn't do it, just the way his face was. So there was a clothesline post there nearby, and the drill instructor said, "Okay, go over there and laugh at that post." And of course, he wouldn't laugh loud enough, so he told him to laugh louder at the post. So of course, we all couldn't laugh either, but we were wanting to severely laugh about the young man who's laughing at the post because he thought everything was funny. One other anecdote at that time was when you had inspections, we had the caps with the bill that came down here, and what you had to do with the inspection time, if they came in, they'd say, "Give me 2," and what you had to do was put two fingers above your nose, and the cap had to fit right above your 2 fingers. So the drill instructor comes in one day and he tells this guy, "Give me 2," and he goes with the 2 salute, double salute, which nobody ever seen before in their life. And the drill instructors had to leave the room so they could go laugh somewhere. So another guy had a similar problem with his rifle butt, had rust on it. And the drill instructor always wanted to look into your rifle butt because if it had rust, you're in trouble. And he told him, well, he looked at it and had rust on there, sticks it up right into his face, says, "What is that?" "It's a butt, sir." "No, what's that right there?" "It's a butt, sir." "No, what is that?" "It's rust." "Yes, that's right. So you're in trouble." So it was humorous times at the time when it wasn't funny. This is one of those situations where it's a place where I'm grateful that I did it. It was the best thing that happened to me, really, as far as training, but I don't ever want to do it again, one of those kind of situations. So I finished there. We, as she mentioned, go to Glencoe, Georgia. Another important time for an aviator is getting their wings. And this was in the middle of Vietnam. They were cranking people out to get people through. So I thought, well, when I get my wings, there's going to be a great big ceremony and get my pictures taken, picture in the paper. And at that time, there were only 2 of us finishing. So the lieutenant calls us in and says, "Come on in, it's time for to get your wings." So we walk in there and he says, here's your wings, go to the next place. So we had no celebration at that point either. Moved on then to training in A6. And before going to that, the previous speaker asked people if they knew about World War II and not made it in. So I'm going to give you a brief political thing about what Vietnam was about. Anybody recall what Vietnam was about? Okay, Vietnam was, of course, Southeast Asia. The conflict there actually started in the early 50s when Ho Chi Minh, who was a Vietnamese guy that was trying to establish communism in Vietnam. And politically in those days, we had a thing that thought that there's the domino theory of Southeast Asia. And thought if one country became communist, every other country, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, might all become communist. And that was the conflict with the French in the early 50s. The French got run out. So we went in our first combat activity, I think it was 1962 until 1972 or 73. One of the previous speakers mentioned that there was in Vietnam, there was like 53,000 combat deaths in Vietnam. That's as far as the wars that the United States have been in. That's the 4th highest after Civil War, World War II, World War I, then Vietnam for a number of combat casualties. I had finished my wing training, go to Whidbey Island, Washington, where we then start training with A6, which is A6A. A6A, A stands for attack plane, 6 is obviously the number of the plane, and A is the version of that plane. The Navy doesn't have bombers, they have attack planes. Air Force, of course, has bombers and heavy bombers. Our plane could carry 28 to 500-pound bombs. That's about 14,000 pounds. And the heavy bomber, the B-17 in World War II, could only carry 17,000 pounds of ordnance. So even the light attack planes had progressed to the point they could carry a large amount of weaponry. So as we get there, we have to study a book, and then after you look at the book, this is actually a training manual that I had for the A6A aircraft. So you do that, then you go start flying, learning how to navigate with a computer, believe it or not. This plane was built in the 50s. This computer was a analog computer, so that when the computer was running, you didn't have lights flashing, you had things rolling, so there was this click, 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 click going on the whole time that you're using the computer to navigate and to help you drop weapons on the appropriate target. We had a target range in Boardman, Oregon, which is just below the Columbia River, where we dropped practice bombs that were 25-pound bombs. They had a little shotgun shell in the end, so that when it hit something, it'd make smoke, so the guys on the ground could see how well you did. Well, we set fires to the Boardman routinely. And the reason we did that, we had a way of delivering a bomb that was specifically for nuclear weapons. And what you do, most times for standard bombing, you'd fly straight and level, drop the bomb and leave. With a nuclear weapon, you fly and you go straight up in the air. And as you're going up in the air, you throw the bomb up in the air. So hopefully you can get far enough away from it before it goes off. So frequently, because of the wind and the inaccuracy of the system, we often set grass fires in Boardman, Oregon. Completing that, we went to, as she mentioned, I was assigned to Attack Squadron 115, which was just developing. It's actually been an older squadron. We were out then attached to USS Midway in early 1971 to go to Vietnam and the Tonkin Gulf, which is just off Vietnam. Vietnam is just south of China, and to the south and a little bit south and west of China, south and east of China, I'm sorry. So we were in Tonkin Gulf, and our main activities when I was there was what was called road interdiction. The North Vietnamese would send people down Laos and a trail in Laos and then into South Vietnam, and our job was to try to prevent that from happening. There had been so much bomb drops there that it looked like the surface of the moon. Now this didn't work out so well because we'd bomb and then they'd go back and fill up the holes, and they could do it anyway. That was one activity to do, and the other one was fly over and have the Air Force show us where to bomb. What they would do is they'd be flying a small plane, they'd drop a smoke bomb and say bomb 300 yards this direction of that. Totally inaccurate as well. We didn't have any idea what we were supposed to be bombing because you couldn't see it. Well, my first mission was the last one of the day. And as I said, we typically in combat, we'd carry 22 500-pound bombs. Ours was the last mission after several missions. First day on the line, the guys that were arming and loading the bombs couldn't keep up. So there was two planes going out. My pilot and I got up to my plane. My pilot was a senior officer, and he'd been flying tankers all his career. And now he was getting to go combat, so he was ready to go. Anyway, we got up there. 2 bombs on our plane, and the next plane didn't have any. So the guys come and take one bomb off, put it at the other plane. The other pilot had been in combat before. He immediately downed his plane. He found something wrong with his. So we got our other bomb back on, at least, and went off and did our mission. When you check in with the forward air controllers, you had to tell them what your load was. So I call up and say, this is so-and-so and so-and-so. He said, well, how many bombs you got? I say, we've got bombs. He said, I can't hear you. We got bombs. I still can't hear. We got 2 bombs. So he says, did you have trouble getting off the deck with that load? And so we were embarrassed. But other than that, it was okay in that regard. I flew 60 combat missions in Vietnam, and surprisingly, I can only remember about 3. That's a good sign, because obviously they weren't very exciting. The one I do remember was one time I had to fly with the Air Wing commander. The Air Wing commander was a senior captain who was over all the squadrons on the aircraft carrier, which were about six different plane squadrons on the aircraft carrier. And then the captain could fly whenever he wanted to, so he decided he'd fly a combat mission. And I got assigned to fly with the air wing commander. So I'm thinking, boy, I must be good. He's probably asked for me personally. My reputation is great. And so we flew, but I should have got a clue when one of the senior officers says, well, be sure you go over the checklist with the captain. Well, I always go over the checklist, so that's no big deal, but I should have had a clue about that. So anyway, we take off, we fly, we do fine. Comes back, everything's good. So for some time I thought, well, I must really be the cat's meow in this squadron. I got to fly with the captain. Later I realized I'm a junior officer. I flew with a CAG. They didn't think I was good. They just thought I was expendable, so that they could get rid of me that way without any problem. So let me see here. I've got my notes and see where we go from here. At any rate, I think it's time to again, the purpose of Veterans Day is to just celebrate those who are serving us and being in the service. Again, taught me a lesson. Taught me several lessons. One is to set goals, work hard, serve other people, have faith. Because one of the things that happens, certainly, all of us would like to think we have control of everything in our lives, but we don't. And certainly, when you're in a combat situation, you have almost no control. So you just have to rely on your faith also, as well as your abilities that you've studied and learned. So. Now, I have confidence in the younger generation. I have confidence in you all. Tom Brokaw wrote a book a few years ago about the veterans of World War II and calling them the greatest generation. So be prepared. We never know what generation is going to be called on next to be the greatest generation to defend our freedoms in our country, maybe even defend other people from bad folks. So. Again, that's the lesson I hope you learn is just to stay in there, work at it, work hard, and serve other people more than yourself. And again, appreciate you allowing me to be here today and tell a little bit about my story and the story of others.
We'd like to thank Mr. Clemens today for coming and sharing his story with us. Let's give him one more round of applause. We'd also like to thank any other veterans in attendance today. If you're a veteran in the audience, would you please stand up so we can thank you? We want to thank all of you guys for coming today. Students, you are now dismissed back to class.